one of the saddest things that I have to stand up as the poverty critic in the NDP and look across at the Liberals and tell them what they are doing wrong. And one of the things that we do, and I want to just one point, is that we have people in our province, as an example, born with Down syndrome. And those people grow up to be adults and they want to contribute. And they get a small job, either stacking shelves in a supermarket or mopping the floor in McDonald's. The government of Ontario claws back 50 cents of every dollar that they earn. 50 cents of every dollar because they are on ODSP. I have said, and I will say it to you, that one of the first things we should do is to alleviate the poverty of hundreds of thousands of people with disabilities, is to allow them to keep the first $8,000 they earned, combined with the $12,000 they get for disability, would bring them to $20,000, which is the poverty line. It ought not to happen that you are born with a disability and you have to live your whole life in poverty. I would start by doing that. Every single member of the public out there will agree with us.
Thank you. Andrea? Thank you very much. There's no doubt that the income side of people living with disabilities or having other abilities is a big part of the issue. But the other part of the issue is there are not affordable places for people to live. So we have to look at the housing piece as well. We have to look at building affordable housing, but also housing that is accessible and housing that is supportive housing, so that people can live a decent life with a good roof over their heads and not have to pay every penny that comes into their pocket on their housing costs, because that's the single highest cost that people have to spend money on. So it's a shame that the provincial government has not been investing in affordable housing. Even though the federal government sent the money over to the province, we did not build any housing in this province for the last 10 years, and that is a disgrace. So absolutely, I agree with my colleague that it's the income piece that's extremely important. But without the housing, without places where people can live in dignity and affordably, they're not going to be able to have the kind of lifestyle that they deserve. Thank you. Gilles?
Well, I agree with most of what was said by my two colleagues. I think we're on the same page, all of us, when it comes to that. But I think what the challenge for us is that if we're heard in the same voice all the time, same old, people are not going to vote for us in larger numbers. So we got to do what the party was very good at. Tommy Douglas was a master at it. And proposing ideas that were new and different, and that worked. When he went out to try to sell Medicare, nobody believed it could be done. It's now one of the tenets of our society. So I say, let's admit that ODSP and welfare system as it stands doesn't work. It was designed 40 years ago, and it's inadequate for today's society. People that are disabled are trapped in a system that they cannot get the type of supports they need or the income that they need in order to live with some dignity, and those who are unemployed fall further into the trap. So why don't we say, if I was elected Premier, one of the first things that I would do is call the First Ministers' Conference to renegotiate with the federal government and the provinces of how we do income support and how we do disability. So one level of government does comprehensive disability and the other one does a guaranteed annual minimum wage. I said it, thank you.
Peter?
Thank you, and I appreciate the question. Gilles is right. I mean, generally we will be in the same ballpark in terms of policy on this. And we all recognize that this is one of Ontario's shames, where people who are differently abled, who are not able to support themselves, are condemned. They live very difficult lives. There's no question we have to have income support, and we have to have the investment in affordable housing so people can live with some dignity. But I think we also need to look at the ability to subsidize the wages of those who are differently abled, who are employable, who need accommodation in the workplace. Yeah. If, in fact, people had, say, $10,000 a year that comes to them now as welfare, that was invested in the workplace so they could actually have an independent income and be fully integrated into society, that would make a huge difference. There are tons of talents in every sector of our society. We can't afford to waste any of them.
Thank you.
Okay, but the whole issue around poverty is that this government, this Liberal government, came out with a plan about a month ago, 2 months ago. And Deb Matthews, known to all of you, stood up there saying it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, 25 and 5, they're going to alleviate poverty, provided, of course, that Jim Flaherty in Ottawa gives them the money. Well, that isn't good enough, because we as New Democrats know that it isn't just about poverty in children, and it's not just about whether Jim Flaherty gives her the money. It's all of the people on ODSP. It's all of the people on Ontario Works. It's all of the people, there's a thing called the color of poverty, because you can show that racialized minorities tend to have more. What about our Aboriginal community? Not a word has been said about that. What about new immigrants and the poverty of them? We need, as New Democrats, to reach beyond what Liberals are going to do. When Liberals talk about children, I accept that. But we as New Democrats have to talk about everyone who lives in poverty and the ways to get them out. And I feel as strongly about our First Canadian community as I do about children. We need to alleviate poverty everywhere in this province.
Well, again, it's a challenge, and this is what we need to do, is that we need to be able to connect with voters so they vote for us in greater numbers. Why? Yes, we want to win, but we want to get to the government side so that we can affect real change. And I say part of the problem that we now have, we play the politics of opposition. We play the politics of blame. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that as a party. Yes, Dalton McGuinty every now and then needs to get a bit of a slap, and we're very good at that. But the very next breath should be, what are we prepared to do, and what are we prepared to put forward that responds to the problem? Here's the issue. We've got programs that basically are built 40 years ago that don't respond to people, and what we need to do is find new solutions for old problems. And if we engage the public in our party in a discussion, a dialogue about what we propose to fix these problems, not by putting Band-Aids on programs that don't work, that's what the establishment wants, and that's what the media wants to hear us say. That's why we don't have electoral success. Let's engage the public and talk about new ideas. It's wrong the way that the programs work now. We would do stopgap to fix so that people are able to survive, but we would propose the way that social programs should work into this new century.
But you know, it's interesting because my community actually came up in a dialogue process led by one of our legal clinics with an idea that was brought forward to the government, and of course they ignored the idea. But the idea was, and I think it's something that can be transferred not only in terms of ODSP, but also Ontario Works or social assistance and even WSIB. And that is the setting up of a separate body that's not of elected officials. It's like a board. And the board determines annually the increase in the rates. The idea was because governments don't do it, right? It's not politically palatable for a government to increase welfare because they'll get a backlash from the right wing. And so they don't. And so we have now people living in much greater poverty today in Ontario than they did under Mike Harris. Why? Because the Liberals didn't have the guts to do what they said they were going to do and deal with poverty in Ontario.
But
and
what
so
are we
we have
gonna
the
do?
same situation. So I believe that one of the
What are
things
we
that we
gonna
got to
do?
do on top of all of the things my colleagues have spoken to around specific rules that are currently not working right, we need to get a separate group that every single year looks at the rates and realizes where the poverty rate is, where the poverty line is, and make sure that people are getting enough income to live more than a subsistence lifestyle.
It isn't just a question, though, of having it hands-off politically. We have to reach people in Ontario and tell them that not only is it a shame that in Ontario those who are differently abled are living difficult lives, but there is a cost to that. There are parents who stay home to look after their children, who forgo wages and don't get to pay taxes. There's a cost to a society when people are undernourished, when they live in housing that is inadequate. There's a cost in terms of health care, emergency health care, that has to be provided. We talk about the cost of dealing with poverty, but not the cost of having it happen in our society. That's where we have to go to move the public.